Hello, everyone, and welcome to Kings of Fantasy Football. I'm your co-host Pablo, and here's my co-host.
Leo.
So, on today's episode, this is our final regular season start/sit, as it is week 14. So, another regular season in the books for fantasy football. Congratulations to everyone who has either secured a playoff spot. To everyone still fighting, good luck this last week. Hope you can get a spot. So again, we're going to be discussing players that we think they should start or sit. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with quarterbacks. So the first quarterback that I would start this week is going to be Jalen Hurts of the Eagles. He has a really favorable matchup against the Panthers, and that offense has been clicking as of late. The Panthers' defense is nothing to be concerned about. So definitely, if you have Jalen Hurts, he's been one of the top quarterbacks. Definitely think that you should start. What about you, Leo?
Yeah, so this week it's really tough for many fantasy managers out there because we have six teams on bye, and there's a lot of studs that are on bye, like Jaden Daniels, um, Lamar Jackson, Anthony Richardson, and so on. So yeah, so hopefully we can help you get to the finals or into the playoffs this week with our starting sets. My first start and sit is actually I'm gonna go with my one of my hometown quarterback here, Tua Tagovailoa. He's even though he's playing against the Jets this week, but they're at home. The Jets have been a little bit shaky lately. They've allowed two of the last three quarterbacks to throw for have over 30 fantasy points against them. And this week, I see Tua, who's been hot himself, going um, reaching 20 plus fantasy points as well. Like I said, this week, a lot of teams are on bye, and you just want to try to get to the next round there. Tua so far over the last 4 out of 5 games, he's had at least 21 fantasy points. And then the the last two, for the last five, and then the last three, he's had over 29 fantasy points. And that included a tough um, matchup last week against Green Bay at Green Bay. He scored 32 fantasy points. So Tua is one of my first quarterback to go with.
All right. Um, I was actually gonna say him, so thanks for taking him. But my backup should be just as good, and that's gonna be Baker Mayfield of the Bucks. He's facing the Raiders, who've given up the second most fantasy points to QBs in the last 4 weeks. So very favorable matchup. Um, and he hasn't been doing as well as he was, during the middle of the season, but last 2 weeks, 20 points and then 13 points. He has Mike Evans back, so again, this favorable matchup definitely would start um, Baker, who's your last quarterback. Sorry.
Well, this quarterback, I'm gonna go a little bit deeper for teams that are a little bit in deeper leagues, and I'm actually gonna roll with him because I have Lamar Jackson on a bye, and out of all the ones, I think this guy has a little bit potential, and I'm gonna go with Will Levis. He's got he makes plays with his arm and definitely with his legs. He has a super awesome matchup this week, going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are allowing the most fantasy points to quarterbacks this season. Recently, he's allowed Jared Goff to go for 49 points, fantasy points, and also Jalen Hurts 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, sorry, at 33 point nine fantasy points. So even CJ Stroud, even though he only had 16 fantasy points last week, he threw for over 242 yards and a touchdown. That was because obviously Joe Mixon went off on them on the ground. So I think this week might be Will Levis game to get him out there and get some fantasy points for you. Like I said, there's some deeper leagues, obviously.
Yeah, I like that start. Jaguars defense, like you said, has been getting up the most points, so I think Will Levis can flourish. Now, moving on to quarterbacks that we should sit. First quarterback that I would sit is going to be Kirk Cousins of the Falcons. Last week, he threw for 4 interceptions, which basically cost them the game. And he's going up against another stingy defense this week against the Vikings. So unless you have to start him, definitely would not start him this week just based on his performance. Last week was not good at all. Again, that Vikings defense coached by Brian Flores has been doing good all year. So I would sit him. What about you, Leo?
All right, so my excuse me, my first quarterback to sit this week is gonna be Brock Purdy. Um, I know some of us are, like I said, we're kind of limited on our quarterback, but if you start him, just temper those expectations. He's got a tough matchup this week that he's going up against Chicago, who allowed the fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks this week. And last week, he lost a very important piece of the 49er offense, which is CMC McCaffrey, who's out for a while. Mason went out right after him. He's also out on IR. So the some of his weapons are obviously, he's lost Ayuk weeks back. So he's just gonna have not many weapons to work with, and he's gonna be facing a Chicago team that's tough for quarterbacks this year. So last week at Buffalo he only scored 2.16 fantasy points. So, and he is coming off a shoulder injury recently. A couple of weeks back that he didn't play. So to me, I would temper the. If you have to start him, just temper the expectations. But I'll try to see if you can find someone else.
Yeah, that won my matchup last week because he didn't do well. Like you said, temper those expectations. Um, my next quarterback that I would sit um, is going to be James Winston. Even though he had a terrific game this week, I think it was like over 400 yards, 4 touchdowns against the Broncos. Um, Actually, almost 500, so 497, 4 touchdowns, but he had 3 interceptions. He's facing the Steelers this week. We know that Steelers defense is normally pretty stingy, even though the game against the Bengals was a shootout. Um, I don't like that matchup for Jameis. So unless you have to start him, I would sit him this week. What you, Leo?
All right. So my next quarterback to sit this week is also I'm attacking the NFC West this week, and that's Geno Smith. He's facing the Cardinals, who he faced a couple weeks ago. That he only had 15.36 fantasy points, and that was at home. Now they're going to be traveling to Arizona, which Arizona's defense has come on lately, and they've held a few quarterbacks in check, including him. Darnold had 23 fantasy points, but prior to that, they held out Aaron Rodgers to 4 fantasy points, Caleb Williams to 9.18 fantasy points. So, and even before that, Tua was held to 16 fantasy points. So they've held pretty much everyone in check. Only Jordan Love was the one that had over 30 something fantasy points against them, and that was back in week 6. And prior to that was Jaden Daniels in week 4. So it's been a while that they've had allowed someone to go off on them. So to me, Gino is a sit this week if you can.
Yeah, I've been surprised, man. Arizona's defense been stepping up. So I agree with that.
Okay.
Moving on to running backs. I'm sorry that I'm going to pick on the Panthers, but the running back that I would start, Saquon Barkley, number one running back. He's one of the non-QBs in the MVP race. Well deserved. So I'd definitely start Saquon against the Panthers. Who's your first running back to start?
My first running back to start is just someone you just try to keep an eye on his availability this week. You know, because I know he's been a little questionable, but and that's going to be Bucky Irving. He's been on a man on a tear lately for the Buccaneers. This past last 2 weeks, he's against the Giants. He had 27 fantasy points, and last week he went off on the Panthers for 29 fantasy points. So that I see why you're a smart move putting Barkley in there. Even though Barkley's you know, set and forget it kind of running back for sure. But this week, you know, they're facing Vegas, who's been they've been in a lot of shootouts lately, allowing a lot of yardage to everyone. So I would, you know, that's why if you got Bucky, I think he's probably like a star for the rest of the season, I believe.
Yeah, man, I'm keeping a close eye on his status this week because I'm gonna need to pick someone up if he is out. Um, but I'm really happy that I'm able to have him on my roster. So I picked him up pretty early. Started talking about him.
Yeah.
Season paid off. My next running back that I would start. Um, um, I don't know if it's a shock, just because you know their running defense is pretty stingy, but I think Devon Achane is poised to have a good game since Tua's been back. Um, he has been doing well these last 3 weeks, at least 20 points. You know, even if he doesn't have a lot of yards on the ground, he's heavily involved in that passing game. Um, and especially since my leagues are PPR, it definitely helps. So we'll definitely start him in a PPR league, even though he's facing the Jets. You were next running back.
All right, so I was gonna say Tony Pollard because you know obviously he's playing the Jacksonville, so that, you know, that's kind of a nice pick there. If you have him, you're gonna roll with him. But I'm gonna go a little bit deeper, and I'm gonna go with this is an old man. He's over his 30s, and he's just been very very productive. You know, due to the injuries ahead of him, and that's Amir Abdullah. He's playing the Buccaneers, which you know which we both already named players to start against them, which is you know with you with Mayfield and me with Bucky. So you know they're going to be scoring some points, and Amir is going to probably make in PPR leagues. I think he's a nice flex play. Like I said, there's a lot of teams on bye, so you're going to be you know scouring for anywhere you can get some points. So if he's out there, try to get you know you could probably throw him in there as a flex, and he should be able to produce double-digit fantasy points for you this week.
All right, I like that. You said more deeper leagues. All right, now moving on to running backs that we should sit. Um, the first running back that I would sit, even though he did score against the Broncos defense, and Broncos defense, you know, they do well. I'm actually going to go with Nick Chubb to sit. Um, again, even though he did score, actually, no, not against Broncos. No, it was Pittsburgh. That was at home. He did score 2 touchdowns against them. don't know if it's going to be the same. Being at Pittsburgh, so for that reason, I would skip Chubb um, due to the matchup. Who's your first?
My first running back to sit, which is, I know everyone's been riding him all year long, but it looks like the wheels are starting to fall off this running back, and it's not because of any fault on his own, but he's got a competition now, and that's Chuba Hubbard. Over the last couple of weeks, he's gradually with Jonathan Brooks back from the IR. His touches have started to decrease. Last week against Tampa, which that was kind of like a shootout. He had 12 rushes, only for 43 yards, and he only ended up with 2.30 fantasy points. This week they're going up against Philadelphia, who's great against the run, and like I said, Brooks is there, so his touches are gonna you know last week Brooks started making some more ground on him. He had more fantasy points scored than him with 7. So that could continue. And I to me Hubbard's a start this week if you can. But, if you have better options, obviously.
Yeah, I've been contemplating picking them up. Still not looked at the Irving type level just yet. But if Trevor goes down, then he's going to do that running back one. But I agree with fitting Hubbard. My next sit is going to be. I'm assuming he's still going to be the starter. Not for He's going to start again with the DeAndre Swift. They are facing the 49ers this week. The Niners have one of the best run defenses, so for that reason, I would not start Swift in the event that he does play, considering that Roshan is at fault. What about you, Gil?
Yeah, so my second running back is kind of like in the similar boat as Hubbard. He's helped a lot of fantasy managers get through, but now the starter is back, and that's with Isaiah Pacheco back. So Kareem Hunt to me is a sit. Pacheco had a decent game back, in his first game back from IR, and Kareem's Hunt, the touches are gonna gradually uh, go down, which started already last week, and he's gonna probably be kind of like a you know just the splitting carries, but he's gonna be on the shorter end of the stick with the on the total. So to me, Kareem, you gotta start benching him. Uh, see, unfortunately, it sucks, but it's the way it is.
All right. Moving on to wide receivers. The wide receiver that I would start this week, and I'm going to go with someone who has been um, one of the top scorers like in the last 3 weeks as far as receivers. And that would be Mr. Jerry Judy of the Browns. Last 3 weeks, 31 points, 14 points, 45. Of course, it might be less in your leagues than scoring, but been one of the top scorers over the last 3 weeks in general, not just wide receiver position. So looks like he's that number one target in Cleveland. So for that reason, I would start him.
All right. So I'm gonna go with And this player, you might, like I've said, if you have him, you might gonna start him for the rest of the season because he has a beautiful matchups the rest of the way, and that's Jacoby Myers. This team, he's with the Raiders with Aiden O'Connell in there. He was over the last couple of weeks. He's um, Myers has averaged he's had, I'm sorry, 15 targets and 11 targets over the last couple of weeks. And upcoming, he's gonna have games against Tampa, which is gonna be a shootout. They're gonna have to try to keep up with them. Atlanta, Jacksonville, and New Orleans all are in they're they allow eighth most fantasy points or more or fewer. So they or more. I'm sorry. So they're gonna be, he's gonna have a nice matchup starting this week with the Tampa Bay. They're gonna need to throw his way to try to keep up. So definitely, if you have Myers, he's a definitely start for me.
Alright. My next receiver that I would start is going to be someone who I think at this point you have to start him. Um, he doesn't get that many receptions, but when he does, he gets touchdowns. And I know his roster percentage probably skyrocketed. It's going to be Nick Westbrook-Ikine from the Titans. If I'm not mistaken, I think it's like 8 touchdowns in the last 6 weeks. So when he does catch, it's normally for a touchdown, which somehow he's kept up that crazy pace of at least getting a touchdown in the last 7 weeks. So I think he's a must start now. And like I said, he has a favorable matchup against the Jacks, who your last receiver to start.
Yeah, no, definitely that's a good pick. He's very nice with that. He's been doing really well lately, that's for sure. All right, so my next guy is I'm gonna go with. Let's go with Jordan Addison from the Vikings. He's
It's
been
funny
hitting.
that you said him because that was gonna be my first, but I was like, nah, I'm gonna go with someone
Yeah,
who's been getting touchdowns.
yeah, yeah. No, Akini's been like touchdown for sure. Like he's been on fire. He hopefully he continues, but he has the matchup to do it. So for sure. Um, but yeah, I was gonna pick Ridley, but we got too many. We got way too many Titans already in this thing. So yeah, so I'm gonna go. Yeah, let's go with Addison. He's got a nice matchup against the Falcons this week, who are allowing the fifth most fantasy points to to wide receivers this year. And he's a nice sleeper. Like I said, there's a lot of teams on by, so if you're looking for a flex play, he's a someone to start there.
And I think now that Hawkinson's healthy, it's helping him. Of course, JJ's always has the number one
Yeah.
corner on him. It hasn't, especially when he's in that slot. I think with Hawkinson back, it gives him
But
more opportunities, and I like that.
yeah, and I was gonna say another sleeper there, a receiver to start is just due to because it looks like Malik Neighbors might not start this week. So if you have Wandale Robinson or if he's there in your waiver wire, might be someone to pick up there. He might help out in deeper leagues because looks like Neighbors gonna be out this week. He got downgraded to doubtful. So I think so. Just keep an eye on Neighbors if he's out. You might want to throw in Robinson to help out.
Okay. Um, Now moving on to wide receivers that um, you should sit. The wide receiver that I would sit be Darnell Mooney of the Falcons. Those last 2 weeks, he's only gotten 2 receptions and 3 receptions these last 2 weeks. So he's not producing at the high that he was in weeks 8 through 10. So for that reason, Drake London is the number one. So I would not start him unless it's like a flex trade that you need or something. So I would sit ready. What about you?
All right. So this first receiver, he's what to say? He hasn't been very helpful. After he started building my trust a little bit. Having double-digit fantasy points for 3 weeks in a row, then he turned into a pumpkin again, and that's Quentin Johnston. He's been over the last couple of weeks he had beautiful matchups against one was against Baltimore who allows the second most fantasy points. He had 5 targets, 0 catches. Last week against the Falcons, he had 4 receptions. 4 targets for 2 targets, two receptions, and 12 yards. So, like I said, he was building up something, a rapport with Herbert, but unfortunately he's derailed himself off the tracks again, and he's got he's playing against Kansas City, who's the last time he faced them, he was targeted 5 times and only had 1 reception for 9 yards, with for a total of 2.30 fantasy points. So look elsewhere because Johnson ain't gonna help you.
All right. Now this next receiver that I would sit, and this is just going based off of his last 3 games. He has yet to score a touchdown since he's been back healthy in the lineup, and that is DK Metcalf. I think the emergence of JSN has kind of hurt him in that sense, because JSN has been doing really well since he went down. So for that reason, I would sit Metcalf.
All right. My next receiver to sit is gonna be Adam Thielen. A lot of people are gonna be, what? How can you bench him after he scored 23 fantasy points? I go, well, he's playing Philadelphia, who are very stingy against the receivers. So he's gonna have a tough matchup. I think the Philly's gonna have if you have them as a defense. Well, oops, did I say it too early? You might want to start them, but yeah, if Thielen, you might want to look elsewhere. Cause I think he's another receiver that's gonna have a tough time this week.
All right. Moving on to tight ends. I think this guy, he's a must start. He has been a must start these last 3 weeks, which is why he's a must start again this week. Shouldn't be a shock to you, Liam. It's going to be Jonnu Smith of the Dolphins. He's been one of the top scorers these last 3 weeks, not only for tight ends, but generally speaking. So play at home this week. He did score last week, but he still got 11 targets, 113 yards. So expect more good things for Jonnu this week. What about you?
Nice. Of course, you have to take my guy. I know it's bound to happen. All right, now, all right. So my first tight end to start this week, and this is something to monitor. If he doesn't start, just go with the other guy I'm gonna mention. But my first guy to go with is gonna be this is like his first game. This is his first game back from possibly from injury, and that's Jake Ferguson. He's got a wonderful Monday night matchup against the Bengals who've been allowing the second most fantasy points to tight ends this season. If Ferguson does play, I would throw him straight into the if he's gonna be starting, throw him straight into your starting lineup because he's gonna have a wonderful week this week. If he doesn't, play or whatever, just maybe have a backup plan with the Schumacher. That he's been producing very well as well. So that's just someone like I said to go with there. Ferguson.
Right. So, of course, my next guy should be a no-brainer. He's the number one tight end in not only in fantasy but all of football. Looks like he might break some records if he continues on this pace. And that's going to be Brock Bowers, who just the Chiefs last week. Yeah, 14 targets, 10 receptions, 140 and a touchdown. So he's going to definitely must start every week at this point. And who's your next tight end start?
Yeah, no, for sure. He's whoever drafted him is sitting pretty for sure because he's the Sam Laporte of this year. he's been great. Bowers. All right, so let's see here. My next tight end to go with. Let's go with Pat Freiermuth. They're playing the Browns this week. Freiermuth is coming off a very nice game last week that he produced 18.8 fantasy points. He was targeted 7 times, had 6 receptions for 68 yards and a touchdown. He's going to be facing Cleveland, who he faced a couple of weeks ago. He was only targeted 4 times, but he caught all 4 passes for 59 yards. So he was very close to 10 fantasy points. So like basically you could say 3 of the last 4 weeks, he's had double-digit fantasy points. And like I said, this is that's all you can ask for is just try to get a tight end that can get you to around 10 fantasy points and call it a day because it's been you never know with these guys. So I'm gonna roll it with Pat. Moose.
Right. Now the first tight end that I would say that I kind of feel bad for this for him, but also for the fantasy owners that had him because from weeks 5 through 8, everyone was like, "Oh, finally, this is the year that he lives up to being not only one of the top tight ends drafted, probably, but he was drafted in the first round by the Falcons.
Oh man.
But since weeks 5 through 8, he has 2 points, 9 points, 1 point, 0 points. Who am I talking about, Lenny?
Kyle Pitts.
And I
His game.
I
His
feel
game. His
bad
game.
because I mean,
His game has been in the pits.
I just feel bad, man, because if I had him, I was like, I'd probably be like, oh yeah, he's finally, but nope, he went back to his old ways. So I would set him this week against the Vikings.
Yeah, no, it's you can't make excuses for the guy no more. He has a good quarterback now. Um, it's just it's a sad reality, but it is what it is. My first tight end to sit this week, I'm gonna go with Cole Kmet. He had he's had one over the last 7 weeks. He's had only 1 double-digit fantasy points, and that was against Minnesota at 13. But other than that, he's been under 10. Last week he had a tough matchup against Detroit, where he was targeted 3 times, caught all 3, but he only had 26 yards. This week he's got another tough matchup against the 49ers at San Francisco. So I don't see Mr. Kmet doing well. So if you have him, you should ride the pine.
All right. The next tight end that I would sit, and I think I talked about him last week. He has gotten impacted by Evans' return. It's going to be Cade Otton since his 3 weeks, which is 7 through 9. Um, he has not had as great games. 8 points, 4 points, and 6 points, but adjusted for tight end inflation this year is probably more like 12 and stuff. But since the return of Evans, I need to sit Kate Ryan. Unless you need to. And who's your last tight end?
All right, so my last tight end to sit, it's tough to. He's another guy that was drafted high. It's tough to trust him. He might come back. He's definitely got to monitor his availability, and that's Dalton Kincaid. He does have a nice matchup against the Rams that are allowing the eighth most fantasy points, but he hasn't played in a couple of weeks, and he hasn't done much. He's another guy that hasn't scored a double-digit fantasy points since week 8, so it's tough to trust him. Um, you know, so I don't know. I would, like I said, if I have him, and I do have him in a league, I've had to look for other options because I can't trust the guy. That sucks.
But yep, kind of hard to trust tight ends this year. But moving on to defense. First defense that I would start this week is going to be the Vikings against the Falcons. Like I mentioned, Kirk Cousins 4 interceptions last week. Faces another tough defense in Minnesota this week. So um, I would definitely start the Vikings this week. Who's your first defense?
Well, I kind of mentioned the Eagles, but that's kind of like a gimme. But I'm gonna go with let's go a little bit deeper. We're gonna go with the Saints this week. They're facing the Giants, who are allowing the third most fantasy points to opposing um, defenses this year. Over the last couple of weeks, they allowed Tampa to score 10 fantasy points, and then even Dallas, they scored 17 fantasy points last week. And we're talking about Dallas, who's a joke this year. So I see that maybe the Saints getting in on the fun and scoring some points against the Giants, even especially if they're without neighbors too.
All right. My next defense, I guess a bit of a dark horse, and that's just because last week um, their quarterback had a good game, and I'm referring to the Bucks to start, even though Aiden had 340 and 2 touchdowns last week against the Chiefs, whose percentage defense. But just going based off the matchup, I would start the Bucks this week. Who's the next?
Uh, so so my next defense, they're a little bit of I guess like a sleeper, you could say. Um, and they're obviously they're in my backyard too. The Dolphins. They got destroyed last week by the um by the Packers, but they're at home against the Jets, against a quarterback formerly known as Aaron Rodgers. He hasn't done much. He's been horrendous this year. So I think the Dolphins defense are gonna help him, make his right decision and probably retire after the season. So let's see. Let's go with the Dolphins.
Yeah, man, y'all. For some reason, y'all's players are allergic to cold weather. Y'all got
Yeah,
to
man.
be
Yeah, we don't do
do
cold, bro.
spring training somewhere up north or something to get y'all used to
The coldest weather we got out down here is 50 degrees, so forget about it.
it. Um, Defense that I would sit this week. And I'm just going based off of last week because he lit up the scoreboard. I'm gonna go with the Browns defense. I would sit. Um, Russell Wilson did his best game of the year last week against that shootout in Cincinnati. He's back home. Though they have that rivalry, I still think I would sit the Browns this week. What about you?
All right, my first defense to sit this week is gonna be the Chargers. They've been they've been fairly well. That last week they had 19 fantasy points. But this week they're going up against their arch nemesis rival, the Kansas City Chiefs at Kansas City. Last time they played, they only had they had eight fantasy points. But just like I said, this week, the Chiefs have been coming on lately, and they're on and the Chargers are going to be on the road this time, so it might have some cold weather to deal with as well. So I'm going to go with the Chargers as a sit this week.
All right, and then my next sit, they had a good game last week because they were able to score a touchdown. But like Leonard was saying, they're traveling to Miami this week, so I would sit Jets. Even though they're top 12 defense as far as fantasy, but I would sit them. And who's your last defense?
I'm going to sit the Broncos because they're on a bye this week, so I'm going to.
Oh, that's easy.
That's an easy one, right? No, no, I'm just joking around. So let's go with the. Wow. Let's go with that same game. No, you know what? Let's go with Cleveland. I'm gonna sit Cleveland. Pittsburgh's defense offense has been doing well lately, and the the Browns they just lost Ward uh to I think to an injury. I'm not sure if he's gonna be playing this week, and so I'm gonna go with the sitting the Browns. Last time they played, they only scored 7 fantasy points against Pittsburgh, and so I'm gonna go with them. And this time they're playing at Pittsburgh, so let's go with the Browns as a sit.
All right. So thank you everyone for tuning in to our last regular season episode. So thank you everyone who's been listening, all this year. But tune in for our playoffs. I guess series starting next week. We're gonna call it the playoff special. That one we might do a little bit longer just because it's kind of really important decisions. um,
Yeah, no.
so that being said, if you can, please make sure you're sharing our podcast, family, friends, Twitter, social media, TikTok. I don't know how much longer we'll be able to share since that is supposed to be banned on January 19th. It's a whole other story. But again, please share. We're available on all major platforms: Apple, Spotify, YouTube. If you have questions, you can reach me on X. That would be at Archreaper, ARCHREAPR. Leonard, where can we reach you if you have questions?
Yeah, thanks so much for listening, everyone. You can reach me on X if you have any fantasy questions, and that's at Smooth1074. Hopefully, we helped you this year, and you're knocking on the door of the playoffs and get you in, and we'll continue on the playoffs, giving you some start sits for sure. If you like the show, like Pablo said, like and follow the store, subscribe, leave a comment, helps us get noticed, and also definitely share on social media. Much appreciated. Thanks so much to everyone for listening, and good luck this week. Hopefully, you guys can get into the playoffs.
Thanks, everyone.
Peace.